Man is unique and could not have evolved from something less. Years ago, I did this study on creationism and went to a lot of different fields on this. We're looking at the incredibly complex design of all life forms, which points to a supreme designer, the God of the Bible. It's a huge topic, but let's just take a small portion of it and see if we can get a handle on whether or not this is valid. Now, it's valid in the sense that if you look at the most complex thing in the universe, it's man's physical body. Man is unique and could not have evolved from something less. The original man was a superior man. He did not evolve. So we have Dr. Baugh, Dr. Carl Baugh, wrote a book on the subject of creationism. He writes, "It is an amazing fact that man, from Adam to Noah, possessed a composite of approximately 56 characteristics that have never, from Noah's time until the present, been possessed by a single culture of man. What this means is that original man was a superior man. Let's examine a list of the superior characteristics that mankind possessed. Conceptual analysis. Now, we're going with what the Bible teaches, which we look at this overall topic. It's the most reliable source on what we're looking at now, man himself. Conceptual analysis. And man gave names to all cattle, and to the fowl of the air, and to every beast of the field. But for Adam there was not found any an helpmeet for him. That specific names were given to all varieties of separate groups with emphasis on distinctions. Among them requires the ability to conceptualize objectively. And how quickly Adam did that, far greater than it's presented in the Bible, and far faster than what man could do even today. In order to determine that none of the individuals under consideration would be intimately compatible with the observer further enhances the evidence that the observer had mature self-awareness and mental powers. Comparative observation. Gave names to all cattle and to every beast of the field. Not only is there a distinction made between groups, but comparison and nomenclature is assigned accordingly. Point 3. Observational articulation. Gave names to all cattle. Cattle are observed, named, and seen as being categorically separate from undomesticatable beasts of the field. This is at first sight. Those assigned names were articulated and memorialized for ongoing generations. Whatsoever Adam called every living creature, that was the name thereof. Such deliberate memorializing for future generations requires sequential listing, even if only by memory. He didn't have a laptop, didn't need one. Synergistic language, point 4. And Adam said, "This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh." Languages which use enlarged expression enhanced by immediately preceding statements require complicated emotional and mental functions. The nature of the recorded expression entails common genetic makeup in contradistinction to the other life forms mentioned, known at least by the writer of the manuscript and known by surface value of the text to Adam, the person making the statement. Common contradistinctive genetic makeup has only been known within recent years by our generation. Functional knowledge among the ancients surpassed the commonly held view among the anthropologists. And so point 4, synergistic language. What does that mean? Well, here's what it means. Looking at the phrase in the Bible, and Adam said, "This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh," referring to Eve. Languages which used enlarged expression enhanced by immediate preceding statements require complicated emotional and mental functions. The nature of the recorded expression entails common genetic makeup in contradistinction to the other life forms mentioned, known at least by the writer of the manuscript and known by surface value of the text to Adam, the person making the statement. Common contradistinctive genetic makeup has only been known within recent years by our generation. Functional knowledge among the ancients surpassed the commonly held view among anthropologists. You read the history of anthropology, it goes to primitive. From biblical information, mainly, we have far more complex concepts than what anthropology has evolved from. Supposed caveman, which is a misnomer, and as historical accounts, which have some basis of fake religious points of view. We go back to the Bible, and when Adam said, "This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh," just one statement is enough to realize, wow, this guy immediately knew the relationship he had with this other body, this female body. Point 5, speech anatomy. Leave his father and mother and shall cleave. The complicated structure of the larynx system and the ability of the oral muscles to frame these words far surpasses commonly held views regarding developing man, such as Neanderthal or Cro-Magnon. Because that's projection, which can't be proved because you can't observe neither Neanderthal man nor Cro-Magnon man behave, unless you go to some primitive jungle and view the point that these are real men. They are dressed in a fashion for their environment and have skill sets which are quite complex in order to survive, and they don't have the tools, yet they are creative enough, and with their speech with one another, they're far more complicated than history would have us lead us to believe. Parallel expression 6. Bone of my bones, flesh of my flesh, called woman from man, taken out of man, leave his father and mother, cleave unto his wife, they shall be one flesh, repeats the concept of common flesh as first mentioned in parallelism. This form of poetry and complicated expression reveals a highly developed ability in expression. Poetic declamation. Not only is this a form of complicated poetic expression, but it is a progressive statement encompassing origin, state, and destiny of the speaking person, that was Adam, and the audience, woman, to be heard and observed by future generations, father and mother. Developing man is totally incapable of this speech form. Point 8. Domestic attachment. They shall be one flesh. Monogamy and union are expressed and pronounced in the declamation. Filial and romantic ties are strongly suggested. Has that been the recordings of our history as we go through and they talk about multi-wives and nothing about a union between man and woman in their marriage and relationship, but possession of an actual enslavement scenario. Well, original man was far beyond that. Domestic orientation. Knew Eve his wife. Position and physical union are both expressed in an oriented sense. Father, mother, and child are listed by name. Incident reference. Knew, conceived, have gotten a man. A conscious reference is made to physical relations at conception and birth. Detailed sensitivities are honorably expressed with a deliberate emphasis on time and event. This is not in history, but original man it is. Occupational distinction. Abel was a keeper of sheep, but Cain was a tiller of the ground. This concept exposes more than a casual reference to occupation. In short expression, we are given names, occupations, and job descriptions. Keeper and tiller are in correct reference to their appropriate occupations. Time perspective. Tiller of the ground in process of time, brought of the fruit of the ground. Recognition of time, cultivation, and harvest requires sophistication and concept. Man is again seen as being mature, sensitive, and competent. Environmental cultivation. Tiller of the ground. Anthropologists agree that mature man is the only creature which can deliberately alter his environment. Deliberate cultivation for harvesting purposes is clearly described, requiring concept and intent. We get to point 14, religious preoccupation. Original man brought an offering unto the Lord. For example, in that phrase in Genesis, religious exercises ascribed to man alone. Conscious religious activity with a specific offering to a specific God is described. That's original man. Conceptual anarchy. Cain was very wroth, very angry. And the Lord said, so on. The related expression is that of anger to the point of vindictive action against the established authority. Point 16, emotional response, negative one. And his countenance fell. Displayed emotional response to a person relating to an event in time, followed by consequences of that response, can only be interpreted in the light of cultured man. But this is original man. Point 17, criminal propensity. Individual. Cain rose up against Abel, his brother, and slew him. Meaningful commentary is given with insight into individual moral shortfall. Anthropologists view morality and accountability to have developed very late in man's descent. How wrong they've been. It's almost like fiction. Social anthropologists recognize criminal propensity as being the experience of truly modern man. Point 18, guilt consciousness. My punishment is greater than I can bear. Modern sophistication and sensitivities are in view in a very ancient context. Knowledge that this guilt complex would follow in his experience for years authenticates the test as being more than embellished writing. 19.19, moral designation. Whosoever slayeth Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him sevenfold. Moral responsibility to a person and consequences in the event of failure are clearly defined. Protection and restriction relating to the guilty person are also enforced. Not evolving. This is original man. This describes sophisticated structure. And the anthropologists seem more like fiction writers. Territorial recognition. Dwelt in the land of Nod on the east of Eden. General extent and boundaries are indicated with geographic notation. Fully developed human characteristics are certainly in view with emphasis on recognition of those boundaries. Point 21, material accumulation, individual. And he builded a city. Accumulation beyond food gathering is a uniquely human experience. Structured city building indicates sophistication. Cultural identification. He builded a city and called the name of the city. There is no mistaking the fact that cultural extension and establishment are intended in the test. Scope and extent are not indicated, but cultural implications are explicit. Engineering development. Builded a city. In order to build or envision a city of any size or complexity, conceptual engineering functions are necessary. In some undeveloped communities, these functions are not written or even expressed, but the functions are envisioned and employed. The ability to place one small building in relation to another is a basic concept of requiring engineering perspective. Offspring endowment. And called the name of the city after the name of his son Enoch. Filial endowments are recognized as being ultimate resources and expression of Homo sapiens. To find this characteristic listed among the ancients invited a restructuring of our views of man's history.